In 2,000 years of history, Christianity has never embraced alternatives to lifelong monogamy. Every now and then, weird Christian offshoot sects pop up that do, and they're always expelled from broader Christian community and treated as heretical. However, atheists have already made the Handmaid's Tale a reality. The difference is they don't call them handmaids, they call them surrogates. The surrogacy debate is not up on the mainstream political radar yet, but it should be, because it is, as the Handmaid's Tale correctly points out, it is a horrific human rights violation. It's happening right now, and it's defended by the secular left, and it's opposed by the Christian right. And I'd be willing to bet that every single leftist who goes into this video thinking that I'm wrong about the Handmaid's Tale is right now in their head finding ways to defend the morality of surrogacy. The standard argument is that the Handmaid's Tale women had no choice. They were coerced into being surrogates. But with the modern surrogacy movement, women are voluntarily choosing it and giving it their consent. This is, of course, the exact same argument that the left uses for defending prostitution under the rubric of sex work is work, and they ignore the fact that the overwhelming number of women involved in sex work are from poor and abusive homes. I'm not on the left, and I tend to hate leftist ideology and tend to think that it's almost always evil, but it's not exclusively evil, and there are some ideas from leftism that I do admire quite a bit. And one of them is captured in this saying by Anatole France: "The law, in its majestic equality, prohibits the rich as well as the poor from sleeping under bridges, begging in the streets, and stealing bread." Historically, the left has been very sensitive to the idea that a lack of money isn't really that different than having formal institutionalized oppression placed upon you. And this is captured very well by the political philosopher Adam Swift, and he compares two fictional societies. One is totalitarian, so it's called Totalaria. And in Totalaria, 20% of the population is forbidden from traveling, and they're forced to live in a small ghetto within larger cities. And in another fictional society based on libertarianism, there are no laws against any of these things. But 20% of the population is too poor to travel, and they're too poor to live anywhere except in these small ghettos within larger cities. And the question Swift asks is, what's the difference between libertaria and totalaria? Is there really more freedom in libertaria, or is that just a facade? Now let's apply this logic to surrogacy. And I have no idea what percentage of women in Gilead are surrogates. It seems like only really wealthy men can afford surrogates, so let's say it's 1 woman in 200. So in Gilead, 1 woman in 200 is forced legally by law to become a surrogate. And in America, 1 woman in 200 is paid by a wealthy person to become a surrogate. Is America really any freer than Gilead? Now, it's worth pointing out that the left has a huge blind spot about surrogacy, and they will watch The Handmaid's Tale and then immediately turn around and accuse Christians of wanting to create a Gilead, not because of surrogacy, which they defend, but because of the pro-life position. Now, this is extremely ironic because the entire plot of The Handmaid's Tale is about these women who were raped. They were literally raped, and yet they put their own lives at risk in order to save their babies. So I can't even imagine a more pro-life fictional treatment than The Handmaid's Tale. But let's bracket that inconsistency and just take on abortion and forced birthing. Now, there's really 2 main ways to defend abortion. One is based on personhood, which says that a fetus only attains rights after it reaches a certain state of development. And here's the central problem with personhood. In the entire history of humanity, the people who divide human beings into those who have rights and those who don't have rights are always the bad guys. And they're not just kind of bad, they're always really horrifically bad. So if you're on the side that's dividing human beings into those who have rights and don't have rights, you should probably stop what you're doing. And yes, a fetus is a human being. There is no scientific debate over that. They are living members of the species Homo sapiens. The other defense is to argue that a fetus does have a right to life, but that a woman's right to bodily autonomy trumps it. Judith Jarvis Thompson famously argued this in her article, A Defense of Abortion, and others like David Boonin have tried to carry the torch, But you can search YouTube until the cows come home, and you'll never find anyone who's pro-choice, except maybe the occasional college student asking questions after an abortion debate from the audience, actually making that argument, because it's pretty bad. The most that these violinist-type arguments can establish is an analogy to pregnancy in the case of rape, and attempts to go beyond that, such as with floating people seeds, don't really work. So therefore, the most that these violinist-type arguments can establish is that a woman who's been raped has no maternal obligation to her baby, and I do agree with that, but they don't even establish that it is then okay to proactively kill her baby. And what I think lies at the heart of all of these debates is the unequal distribution of the burdens of pregnancy, and that's obviously a biological constraint of human nature. Women get pregnant, men don't. And so the question then is, how do we harmonize the interests of men and women so that they can live with peace and equality and agency? And that's actually best done through lifelong monogamy. In a promiscuous world, women may not even be getting a child support check from the father of their baby, and even if they do, that's an extremely unequal distribution no matter how much the state steps in. But in a world that practices lifelong monogamy, which we did throughout 2,000 years of Western history, then all of a sudden you get something much closer to an equal distribution of labor. It's not equal because, again, men don't get pregnant, but tying the man's fortunes to the woman that he got pregnant and to his offspring does equalize the burden. So if we want a way out of all these problems of men and women not getting along, the answer is monogamy.